At this point, we are going on to our next session, which is a world panel discussion by Michelle Jump and Joern. So I'm assuming they're both in the panel here. Michelle,
I'm
is
here.
Michelle here?
Hi.
Hi, Michelle. Hi.
Hi. Um,
So maybe I'll
you're,
take a minute to introduce you, but I can't see
yeah, if you
you.
would, and just check the chat.
Okay. Um, okay. Okay. All right. Let's go with so Michelle Jump, she's well known in the cybersecurity circles. She's the CEO at MedSec, where she's responsible for providing strategic leadership training and education to the medical device industry. She's a thought leader in the area of medical device cybersecurity practices and processes, and participates in a variety of domestic and international standards, as well as relevant industry and government initiatives. So, welcome, Michelle, to our
Me?
world panel. I know you're going to get started.
I
And
am. I'm going to share right now. Um, we have a little bit of a hiccup. Uranus trying to get into a place where he can present. If he cannot, I will just present his slides. We're gonna we're gonna wing it a little bit. There because you guys are in Pacific time and you're running on Eastern time, there's a little bit of a confusion there. So I think he's gonna try to get to a place where he can present. But I present first. So I think that's a good thing. We have
yes,
30 minutes to go over the whole maze of international device regulatory challenges. So I'm going to get started and jump right in. We're going to try to leave some time for questions, but there's a lot to cover. And I don't know if Justin's still on the panel, but it's kind of funny because Justin, I don't know if you're on the panel still or if you jumped off.
I'm still here. I'll
You're
probably
still
hang out
here.
a little
I don't
bit.
know if you remember, like I had to follow you at AdvaMed's cyber conference as well. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm not even going to try to go over the details because I know that Justin's going to do that. So I, so I went through a slightly different approach. As Sundari mentioned, my name is Michelle Jump, CEO at MedSec, and my companion Joern is desperately trying to get to a place where he can jump on for you guys. But like I said, fortunately, I am first. We're going to be talking about a few different things. One is kind of this big picture. I know you guys are going to be talking about international issues as you close out today. I'm going to talk about some things that we think about when we think about some of the challenges of international. And then I'm going to talk about United States and Australia, and then Uranus scheduled to talk about European Union and Asia. Obviously, this is not every country, but with 30 minutes, we did what we can. So there's lots of great content today, and so we wanted to make sure that we could get as much information over to you as possible. So we're kind of running on the assumption that, Justin did his job and went through everything about the US guidance, and I'm just going to kind of talk a little bit more strategically about it. But before we do that, we have big picture things to consider when you're thinking about international. So these are just things that I think about and talk about, cover when we look at companies who are trying to navigate lots of different regions. One, it's important to know what the trigger is. What countries wait for submissions to initiate the review of your cybersecurity? Others, such as Europe, and now, as you've heard from Justin, I wasn't sure if you can talk about this, started incorporating it into audits, inspections. So we've seen that in on the European side, and MD SAP is doing this as well, where they're starting to ask about alignment conformance to 81001-5-1. Um, then you have Japan, which is a little unique. You're, and we'll talk about this later, where they place the expectations for all products actively sold in the country, showing conformance to 81001-5-1. So that's one thing is where are you being triggered to provide evidence that you've done what you're supposed to do for cyber. That's an important thing to consider. Another one is what's this harmonization center? What is everyone kind of collating around to show that they have met the bar for good cyber? And the center point right now seems to be mostly 81001-5-1. This is a standard that has been getting more and more attention. We're in the middle of revising it within TC 215 Joint Working Group 7. which owns the standard. Chris Reed is the project lead for that. We're running along. We should be sending that out for comment for revision. Nothing super significant being changed, but the because of its intense use, we thought it could use kind of a usability overview and update and clarification. So the harmonizing center right now seems to be that international standard, which is nice to have kind of a central place where we're looking at kind of a common baseline. The third item that I'm going to highlight on the international challenge space is horizontal versus vertical expectations. Sometimes they're regulations, sometimes they're not. So as regions build more horizontal regulations or other expectations, this means like across all, NIS2, right? Across a whole bunch of industries, there's one common set of expectations. We see this a lot in Europe right now, and Joern will talk about this. Manufacturers need to pay attention not just to their industry specific expectations, but also this area around um, horizontal expectations. And then many of these countries also have vertical expectations in their industry in the form of guidance, or in the case of US statutes or regulations. So, speaking of the US, Justin did a great overview. Thank you again, Justin, of what's going on with the US. I always like to show this. The FDA has been very busy since 2013. Can you believe it's been 13 years now, almost 13 years, since we had the first draft of our pre-market guidance. And I always like to point out that, so the top is the pre-market activities. The bottom is more of the post-market activities. 524B wasn't solely post-market, it was a lot of it. We haven't seen an update on that post-market guidance in a while, but if you look at 9 pages in 2014 for the pre-market guidance, we had 30 pages of post-market and 2017 with the release of that draft, and then 2018 for the final. 57 pages for the 2023 final guidance, 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And then when we had this final June update in 2025, I didn't add the one that we just had, is 64 pages. So the detail has definitely gotten bigger from 9 pages in 2014 to 64 pages. And maybe Justin knows the total page count for the one that just got released in February. I'm running out of room, Justin, for my timeline. So you guys got to slow down a little bit. I got to let things fall off. I don't know. But for key considerations in US regs, right? So we have these amendments. This means that you're legally enforceable to align with 524B amendments. And Justin did a great job outlining that. There's a big focus on post-market activities, but all in all, the way the language is worded, it can be applied to the whole life cycle. E-Star, as Justin was talking about, serves as this gated entry. If you do not supply the required documents anymore, answer the questions appropriately, this is your do not pass go point. You cannot enter your submission anymore with just let's throw it against the wall and see what happens. There are significant expectations around what needs to happen for these the submission documents. Um, Most recent updates, and Justin already talked about the QSMR alignment, so I'm going to kind of skip that one. This is one of the higher bars in the industry here in the US, because not just because of what they're asking for, a lot of the countries are asking for similar things. It's the level of detail. And I had to pull the slide that I talk a little bit more about that, but really you need to pay attention to level of detail. Justin talked about this when he was talking about things that could go wrong, and other kinds of challenges where you don't meet the exact letter of the law, the security control categories. If you ignore them and don't talk about them, I mean, there's an E-Star item, you have to address them all, right? And you have to be very specific on what you do. And then these deficiencies are from a playbook. So by nature, they're a little bit more generic, but they're very specific in the detail level of information they're expecting from those guidance documents. So what's required now? Clearly, you need to understand all the types of documents that are being asked for by the FDA. You know, you really, FDA is digging deeper, as are other countries, um, It does feel like it's a little bit harder now, a lot harder now, because what we're seeing in a lot of the deficiencies that are coming through is they're questioning deeper and more detailed. They're questioning security control decisions, and Justin talked a little bit about this, reviewing against specific sets of controls about not only how those controls are implemented, but how you made the decision to implement them, how risk decisions are made. All of these things are being put in place. Key takeaway, regulators are asking for documents. Um, uh, a regulator is asking for documents that is one level of understanding. That's a checklist, right? That has been around for a while. The current expectation is more focused on the how did you implement it and give us better evidence that you really took it seriously. Those who leverage just the checklist approach are coming to a difficult realization that submissions are not a checklist activity anymore. So, little blue box summary, effort is no longer enough. Effectiveness is the key thing that you want to be focusing on. You can no longer say, hey, look, I did threat modeling. You now have to say, look how I use threat modeling to create a more secure device. So if you're thinking about, you know, an A for effort job, that's not going to work anymore. You really have to show that you implemented it into your larger process and you're embracing it into your culture. Okay, that was really fast, but I'm almost done. I just need to talk about Australia too, and I don't know. Let me know if Bronna, give me a little ping if you see Urine has gotten on.
Is
Yes.
on. Yarn is on.
He is. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes.
Because I don't want to go off if I need to share. So that's great to hear. And I see Justin has confirmed that the FDA guidance is still 64 pages, still a little swap out. So in Australia, a couple of things to keep an eye out for. There was a pretty major cybersecurity act in 2024. I would really suggest you guys take a look at this if you have not already, because there are lots of things there that you need to pay attention to. There's a lot of focus on critical infrastructure, which is how a lot of medical devices get pulled into play here. They have their IoT security standards, their required ransomware reporting, voluntary incident coordination, and their incident review board. So, balance of pre-market and post-market. A lot of the post-market is coming in here, though. Oops. Uh, Another noteworthy item in Australia is to keep an eye out on how this recent adoption they had of the full 62443 series as a national standard for protecting critical infrastructure. They outline why they think that this is important for protecting public health and these things. We're keeping an eye on how this is developing and how it may hit medical device manufacturers. Number of large MDMs are highlighted by the Australian standards groups for adopting. Philips and GE Healthcare were highlighted as those doing that. So with that, those are just a couple of highlights I wanted to provide to Australia. They've been updating their guidance slowly. But with that, I will pass it over to Joern and let him take over and talk about what's happening in the EU.
All right. Hello, good morning. Can everybody hear me well?
I can hear you.
I can hear
Perfect.
you. Yep.
Perfect. Then let me share my screen and then can you see my screen as well?
It's in the presenter mode.
Oh, it's in the presenter mode. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So I just want to basically provide an overview about what the landscape looks like in Europe and in Asia. Not too much details. One of the things I want to highlight is that basically in the EU, we are facing a couple of things which are relatively complex because we have either the vertical product regulations, which basically falls under MDR or IVDR and the AI Act. But then we have, in addition, horizontal cybersecurity laws, which basically known to all of you like CRA or the EU Cybersecurity Act, which sets baseline security settings like safeguards for digital products. And then on top, manufacturers and HDOs are facing the critical infrastructure and system security requirements, which they are required to follow. And then at number 4, and this is the fourth level, really is then the governance and the reporting oversight. So as you can see, it's quite a lot of different things, and they're always not necessarily harmonized to each other. But I come to this a little bit later. So for the regulatory movements and what's going on, is very important that currently in the EU, a lot of those regulations are under revision. And so they will receive some updates, not major, but hopefully a lot of updates in terms of harmonization. So the MDR, IVDR is currently under revision. Cyber Resilience Act is basically in the rollout. It takes a lot of time to get us in the different member states. AI Act will receive some updates as well. And NIS, as probably most of you are aware, I'm not even sure if my home country, Germany, has released. I think since January, we started to put this in our builds. Even this is not yet overly enrolled across the member states. So this is coming. So there's a lot of dynamics, aside from that some of those are, again, under review and under enhancement, which is currently happening in particular to MDR and to the Cybersecurity Act 2. So for the product regulations, I just want to be focused on the 4 here, which is the MDR, IVDR, CRA, and AI. MDR and IVDR, as I said, are currently under revision. They are looking into some software classification updates to prevent unnecessary problems with the classifications. Definitely enhance reporting expectations. That is this is one of the bigger concerns, that all these different regulations have not harmonized regulation standards. So sometimes 30 days, others are talking from 72 to 96 days. So that's really a little bit difficult to understand all this. But they are, again, under review, and they will also look into some updates in terms of oversights and documentation efforts, but basically not much from a content and from the requirement, basically harmonization between the different standards. Cyber Resilience Act mandates that security by design, vulnerability management, and strict reporting by September 26. One important thing, it doesn't apply to medical devices. That's always a little bit of debate, because it might impact medical devices once they are using digital products. So then you have to extend your MDR compliance with CRA compliance. Again, manufacturers have dual reporting with MDR and CRA. We hope that will be harmonized with the new revisions, and regulatory harmonization is needed in both cases, as in particular the MDR is not even focusing on international standards as we have in other countries like ISO 80 or 1001-5-1, etc. AI, basically, if your medical device has AI features or is featured by ML, you can basically think about that you fall under the AI Act, because everything which is in a medical device is considered as high risk. Unfortunately, the risk management is definitely not the same as we are used to have in the MDR. So that is, again, different, and the quality processes has to be aligned. So there's a lot of dual work, additional work. And as mentioned with all the others, monitoring oversight is another additional effort, comes on top of everything you do on the MDR. Requirements, comprehensive documentation, transparency obligation are required in general. There's no such rule yet, as we know in the United States, that you can do the updates on the fly without proper updates. That is not yet implemented. And again, it's a vertical horizontal act, which is also applying to other industries. MDC guidance and system level policies. Also, there will be a revision this year, or it has started. In particular, it is basically the playbook for MDR for CRR, and it will ensure that these documents will be more and more harmonized. again, the risk model is not really unified yet. And there's a huge gap in terms of legacy device expectations. So we will see that we receive some reduction of the fragmentation by the new revision, but this again is currently ongoing. We haven't yet done the finance, and industry association like MedTech Europe are working with policymakers to get a basically good news guidance document into place soon. On the system side, just that you see some of the standards we are using or regulation. This is, I think, the most important one. Important here is just to understand that a medical device manufacturer, for example, falls under NIS2 as well. So they are perceived as a critical industry, and therefore we have requirements to fulfill a NIS2 obligation. So that puts a lot of burden. In the EU, there was also a hospital cybersecurity plan to introduce early warning and threat systems based on their own warning system. So they're building something independent from all the known systems globally. And just announced last year, the Cybersecurity Act is receiving a lot of updates this year. Basically, harmonization again, reporting harmonization, but also something which is very important in the EU, that ENISA gets a stronger mandate for oversight and managing all this. Because currently we have a lot of issues that different member states still adapt or enhance or change regulation in their member state legislation, which even impose other concerns towards two manufacturers to keep standards ongoing. In the Asia market, I just picked 4 major markets. I mean, the most prominent one is Singapore, obviously. Is a continuous improvement program. Recently, the HSA has received a new CEO. Dr. Ryan is working a lot on enhancing. So they have a draft already released on best practices, which describes secure by design, SBOM, total product lifecycle management, and AI consideration. With different organizations, we work currently towards the so-called cybersecurity labeling scheme. This is a mandatory labeling scheme, and it will remain so you don't have to do this. I'm sorry, that's a difficult English word for me. It has different levels, but again, this is under review because they are facing a lot of issues with the certification process, basically by high expectation on the penetration tests, which are certified penetration test centers, and basically they have to follow specific that industry is running their own pen test once they comply with the standards. But also there's a lot of discussions concerning the application of risk-based versus standard baseline security requirements. So there is not yet a full-blown labeling scheme in the market, and revision are to come. Notable this year, Singapore is leading or is the share of the IMDRF. So there will be probably some updates in this regards to the labeling scheme. China, not much updates. They have a 2025 mobile MD guideline for network security and encryption. What we hear a lot is that they mostly follow the FDA requirements and try to copy this. So there's not much to say here. Japan as well. In Japan, we have just some concerns following international standards. They usually have not much implemented yet. There are some activities towards the adoption of the SBOM vulnerability management and specific risk assessments. And South Korea has recently updated their cyber guideline last year, unfortunately missing some of the international standards, which makes it even a little bit more complicated to apply to all of the standards. So in summary, for manufacturers, in most of these countries, and with all the different regulation and little changes in between, the complexity is quite high still, and there's a strong wish that we do more harmonization, in particular in the European Union. Everybody is expecting extended lifetime obligations. There's a lot of discussions about ESPOM management and continuous monitoring, up to specific information about legacy devices. And due to the regulation in the industry for hospitals and others, I would say the requirements on procurement and others has heavily increased and impact a lot of additional workload towards to the industry. And finally, really what I wanted to say is really that we should work towards more regulatory alignment, in particular in the EU, but also others, to use international standards and follow the same principles as most of the manufacturers manufacture medical devices which are used across the world. And it's rather difficult to apply all the standards to all the different requirements. That's the same impact is on mutual recognition and reporting. There are different reporting standards, in particular in the EU, but also global. And that requires really global coordination impact. So that's really a call for action that we work towards to a higher degree of international harmonization towards, I would say, a better harmonized and, let's say, practical cybersecurity practice. And that's from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Joern. So there was a question in the chat that I answered, Veronica or Sanharia, whoever's doing the Q&A. I answered it in writing just because I wasn't sure if we were going to have enough time, but wanted to give you an opportunity to weigh in also, Joern. It was, would you consider the FDA guidance the high watermark? And if you follow them exactly, you can safely say that you'd be fine with an EU submission as an example. I said mostly, but I would add a stronger focus to 81001-5-1
Yes.
as a state-of-the-art standard, and in the EU and more horizontal alignment, like as you've talked about. Is there anything else you'd like to add there?
No, it's basically right. I mean, it's a fair statement if you follow FDA standards that you'll at least they have an 80%. I should not give numbers, but you have a high degree of confidence that you should pass the other regulations as well. I agree on that. Yes.
Thank you. And Dick was noting that the EU CRA 4000-1-3 standard and FDA SBOM are very similar. So thanks for mentioning that, Dick. Good to see you virtually. All right. Does anyone have any other questions around? I know that was a bit of a flurry across all of those areas. And, a lot of these areas have had, these regions have had expectations in cyber. But I would say, from my side of the summary, as I'd mentioned earlier, really pay attention to those horizontal expectations that are across multiple industries, critical infrastructure industries, or overall in these countries. Because I don't know about you, Joern, but I really do see a lot of countries saying holistically, we just generally need to get our house in order when it comes to cyber, not just in these particular industries. And so you need to make sure that you're paying attention to this very carefully as you go through and navigate this maze that is international cyber expectations.
All right, thank you. I think that was really helpful, and it's definitely a challenge, to try to keep up with the world over regulation. So we appreciate the insights that both you and Joern provided, Michelle.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it, everybody.